I break it up differently. So like and that's just because of the world I grew up in. Like working dogs to me are going to bite people or find bombs.
Yeah.
And these are bird dogs.
Right.
And I just break them up 2 different sports, but it's really more just for jargon so we can talk.
Yeah. It makes it easy because technically what I would call a sporting dog could be a working dog.
Technically. Yeah.
And vice versa. I mean, people could take a bitey dog and go have it retrieve ducks.
For sure.
So it could be both, but.
Oh, I've got a buddy with a Mal that actually outperforms some of the like labs.
Yeah.
Pretty funny.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Plus all the obedience it probably has anyway.
Yeah. It's kind of funny.
And my biggest thing for people is I explain all the times, I just like working dogs. And so you're saying your definition of working dogs, but I look at herding dogs or, cattle dogs, that category. That's really cool. So we got introduced into that. My buddy Peter's got a couple now, and he had one that was not very good that could kind of do things. And I'm going to stab Peter. He won't listen to this. I know he won't, but we always joke about every dog that he's ever owned it's like a, X thousands of dollar dog, and he's a $1 handler, no matter what the dog is. So you can't push everything against the dog that I watched the first time, but definitely the second dog, he's fixed the $1 handler category, by going and working with this guy's name's Mycon, I believe is how it's pronounced. And he's really big in catalog stuff, extremely good trainer. He's won a ton of competitions, trained a bunch of dogs for big people in that zone or whatever. And he has spent a lot of time working with Peter. And I can see there's a ton more confidence in what Peter's doing and the way that he interacts and the way that he communicates. And now he can do some really cool stuff. And it's insane. You still see dog stuff, and the dog learning process applies all the way across the board. And you'll watch, like we were working with his dog right now, and I always forget what their names are. He had a dog named Rambo, and then he has another dog named something else. And I don't think Rambo's the most recent
no help
one.
here. So
anyhow, it was doing something where he's like, they cue off of our body so much, and though the dog is helping to push the group of cows, right, it cuts out to the right, and he asks it to come by, and it's either away or come by, and that's clockwise, counterclockwise. That's absolutely them. But which dog he's got, I don't know. Joker's his main breeder, is the main stud dog that he works off of right now, but that's Mycon. What's the name of the kennel he's got there? Mora. Mora stock dog. So, but basically he showed how he was asking the dog to come back toward him, but we were in the Ranger, and the Ranger was in that direction. The dog basically was like, no, the Ranger's blocking that. I'm going out. And as soon as he stepped out away from the Ranger and asked for the same thing, the dog just came around. He was like, oh, now I see I'm helping you, not you're using the Ranger to push cows as well, basically. So they pick up quirky things, and he's getting really good at recognizing and reading dogs better, which is one of the biggest things you need to be able to do to work with any type of working dog. But
that's the next world I want to go touch, is the cattle dog world. It blows my mind. Like guys just whistling, and then you see him like compete where they herd the ducks into the ring and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that. I want to learn how to do that very bad.
So you talk about whistling. It's called a shepherd's whistle.
Yeah.
I think and it's for sheepdog, makes sense, but a shepherd's whistle, order you one.
Yeah.
And try and see if you can make that thing work. It is goofy to start with. And the way it fits in until you get it figured out, really. And I've got one. I'm not any good at it. I can do a couple noises, but it is goofy. And I had to get, but the way it fits in your mouth, it hurts the corners of your lips. It's just a weird whistle. And it's like, I don't know. I've got a whistle attached to me. I can whistle with my mouth pretty good. And I would much rather learn how to apply that than use a different product. But it's the shepherd's whistle. That's a unique whistling challenge if you're looking for one.
Yeah. So I know so little about the stock dog or cattle dog world. I didn't even know that they put a whistle in their mouth. I thought they just knew how to whistle, and I was like, well, I'm I'll never be able to do it because I can't whistle.
I can't whistle either. What's interesting about that, there was a Netflix show where they followed a whole litter of puppies in that world, and I didn't realize how much natural ability is actually in those dogs. You see that and you think it's all training, right? But it's really not. They have natural instincts to herd and to work with people. And so based on breedings and stuff, that you have some that are more independent and are more willing to get in there and scrap, and some that are more reserved and are looking to you for how to handle. I didn't realize how much natural ability was involved in cattle dogs and stock dogs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, from a working dog standpoint, you see that as well, I would assume. I mean, it's not just training, is it?
Yeah, so we see a lot more of that in what we call like environmentals, like their environmental factors, which is more like what are they afraid of just naturally.
Sure.
And some of that you can tease out and some of it you can't. Some of it you can fix and some of it you can't. And you have like key opportunities, and sometimes they're unexpected or unplanned. And you try to find those and mitigate those before they are a problem. But next thing you know, you're in a dark spot and the dog steps on a shaky board. And at the inopportune time, a loud noise happens and we haven't done anything with loud noises yet. And then up pops a decoy and now the dog's overwhelmed. Now we're scared of, what are we scared of? Are we scared of shaky floors? Are we scared of dark rooms? Are we scared of the gunfire? Are we scared of the decoy? Well, we just like birds, right? Where a lot of people don't want to correct a dog too sternly when they're in bird odor because they don't want to pair the correction with the bird, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, did we just apply that same pairing sequence to the decoy, which is what we ultimately don't want the dog to be afraid of?
Can you define decoy for us? Because I don't even know if I 100% could say I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the decoy is the guy that, we're sending someone or sending the dog after to bite, right? So that could be a bite suit. We could be doing muzzle work where the dog's in a muzzle and you're just dressed up in whatever prop kind of things that we want you to be in. For us specifically, without mentioning anything, we will have people dressed in certain clothing to present where we think we're going to be operating, to kind of give that dog that picture and those cues and make him comfortable and realize that's the bad guy. All these other people are the good people. So,
is decoy always a person?
Yes.
Is that as valuable? I mean, that's probably more valuable or as valuable as a handler. I mean, how do you rank those?
I would say that the decoy in a solid working dog has more power than the handler.
Interesting.
To the point where when the dog does get on bite, the handler's not training anything. The decoy is the one training the dog. Mm-hmm. The handler can assist in terms of like applying back pressure and releasing back pressure and using cues and stem and all these other things. But it's really the decoy is the one working the dog. So when you're in that moment, you've caught a dog, he's in your pocket and you're working him, you're reading that dog and knowing when to apply different pressures and help him drive through that. And you're looking for certain things. And then some things tell you like, all right, we need to back off or we need to go fix some things. So
it's interesting. We apply a similar concept with young dog development in the bird dog world. Mm-hmm. We allow or ask or expect birds to teach a lot and try and put, though we're here to kind of guide, like you're talking about, we want dogs to learn via birds. And if I had my way, and if I think most bird dog trainers, hunters, enthusiasts had their way, you had access to a ton of wild birds, you would just allow the dogs to learn to hunt birds on wild birds.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, isn't that how they did it for years
Ever?
and years and years before we had pigeons and launchers and e-collars?
And I think even then they still used pigeons, but it was definitely like, just like you would take a working dog and introduce them. You wouldn't just throw them right to a decoy. You would work them up. And I think from what I've gathered talking to people, was that they still had pigeons and they still would get some pen raised birds. And, especially when you're trying to get a dog steady for higher level stuff, they still used them some, but they were proven on wild birds. And definitely once they knew, they introduced birds and they knew how to handle them, then it was like time to go knock some birds around. And that's where you got all your natural pointing instinct really hammered in. And whereas we use, because we don't have access to consistent wild birds, we use pigeons and launchers more. And that's where we can kind of try to recreate that. But
Right.
that takes more timing on the trainer than obviously the bird is going to teach the dog a lot. Like, nope, too much, out of here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the decoy, I mean, he can definitely overpressure a dog and teach him like, hey, you can't win with me, which is not really what we want to do. We'll get there later in their life and their training, but in the beginning, we want to show them really fight forward, right? We're showing them pressure forward from you makes you win, because we never want the dog to disengage or back away or go into a bark and hold unless we tell them to, if that's your game or how some departments are or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, we want you to hit some sort of stimulus or pressure or, worry or angst, whatever word you want to give it, and fight forward. So you're going to regrip and move into the decoy to turn that pressure off, is really what we build into the dog to teach that.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing I did. It was my dog force fetching him. I did that scenario with him with a bite pillow and taught him, when you feel pressure, and that could be as simple as grabbing a paw, that could be, flanking a dog, e-collar. You use the e-collar in training later, but really more like physical pressure, fight forward and turn that pressure off. And my theory behind that with my hunting dog is when he's on that retrieve and he's struggling to get through grass and he's having a tough time, I want you to fight forward, regrip the bird, get it firmer in your mouth and fight forward and drive through that slightly overwhelming circumstance you found yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting you mentioned flank pressure, because we use that as like the number one automatic release button.
Yeah. I'm using it to teach him to actually get a fuller mouth, right? I want that pillow or that sleeve or toy or whatever as far back in your jaw as I can get it. So yeah, we're using it for kind of two different things.
So have you seen, or do you understand what I'm talking about? Or have you ever seen that used, basically?
Flank method?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we're kind of wrenching.
it's not even wrenching.
pressure.
Pick them up.
Yeah, just light pressure there pulls the dog's focus back to that, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
drop what's in their mouth. So if we've got a puppy that's vice gripping stuff and it's hard to get away, because that's a common problem or common question
Mm-hmm.
that folks say. I play fetch with my puppy, but they won't give up the bumper, or they won't give up the object. So then people move into trying to teach drop, which ultimately turns into a game of throwing things at them, or could turn into that game, or even just dropping in the vicinity and going back to hunting or going back looking for another retrieve. So that kind of can start to develop things. We encourage, I don't want to say hard mouse because it's not the right way to explain it. But we encourage
Firm.
strong grips. We were talking
Pressure.
about this.
Yeah.
Yep. Hold tight. I don't want you crunching, mouthing, munching, but I want you to hold on to that and vice grip, basically.
Yeah.
Don't let go. And then how we encourage them to let go, just be light. It doesn't take hardly anything because it pulls enough focus, and they can really at young ages think about one thing at a time. So
Yeah.
you slide your hand down their side, you lightly pick up on their flank, and they go, "What is that?" And they drop what's in their mouth.
Yeah.
So it becomes a very easy way to work past that. But that's interesting that it's the exact opposite of what I
Well, you
use
can
it for.
understand why if somebody just
Yeah.
get bit and they reach down and grab a flank and the dog lets go.
Yeah. Well, and you got to remember too, you're not putting them on a bite and then the first thing you're doing is grabbing a whole handful and it's
Right.
We're building. Maybe I just touch it. He punches forward, you win. Like maybe
Yeah.
I just barely pinch it and bite forward, you win. But it's funny, like you mentioned the drop it thing. You got a hard mouth dog, and a dog that's hard mouth to me on birds is crunching and rolling. Like you're bringing back stuff that's not fit for the table, which is ultimately a force fetch issue. And, you fix it through that. At least I do. But with the drop it stuff, I use a lot more positive reinforcement and prey drive with a tug or a bite pillow or a bumper. Some dogs are crazy over bumpers. I don't use birds for this, but I want that big engagement, that big play, that big fun. Like this toy is awesome and we can play tug and you can even pump away from me and that's fine. But when I go to teach that out command, while the prey is active and we're playing, it's big play. And then I'm going to go completely blank, almost position of attention style. The prey goes dead. It's their first couple cues. And now we're going to get them to work through that sequence. And there's several other methods out there. I like to use knee collar to go through this whole sequence. But as soon as they out the toy, guess what, man? You get it again. And I'm just showing them over and over and over through this system that if you let go of the toy, I will give it back to you.
Yeah.
Right. And you teach that out that way. And I think a lot of people just go straight to like wrenching on teeth and stuff is mostly what I see.
Rolling lips and give it to me. Yeah.
I'm not going to say I've never, pinched some gums, but I think that there's other methods that work, at least in our world, that I've applied to these ones.
It's one of those things that I think is very, there's some pretty strong feelings in opposite directions with this. And I feel like we're kind of outliers I don't know very many bird dog guys that encourage tug of war of any sort, because it's going to create mouth issues. It's going to create hard mouth dogs that play tug of war with birds. That's the thought process. And we teach and recommend and encourage everyone to play tug with puppies, because it not only builds engagement with a young dog, like now we're doing something together. You're not just stealing this cool thing that I found from me. We're playing a game. But the piece that gets missed, like people listen to the first, and I'm not picking on people, all right, people. You listen to the first 30 seconds of that though, and you go, play tug with my dog. Got it. And then we don't get to the second half, which is teaching my dog how to stop playing tug, essentially, right?
Well, proper play too. Like
proper play
with boundaries, right?
Sure.
And proper equipment.
And what you said is it goes limp. That's the first, when I do it with young dogs, basically to demonstrate here, I would hold the puppy so that I have control over where the object is going now and where they're going with it. I hold them, and then this no longer tugs and it's no longer fun.
Right.
Then we go take it from them, throw another one. So like that's the piece that gets missed of. We can show you the tug portion is not a forever thing. It's a beginning development and building engagement and stuff like that. So it's interesting how many of the pieces apply across the board, but
it also builds toy drive. So people will say, "Oh, my dog doesn't like bumpers." But if you work with them at a young age and that is the fun thing and they kind of get to do what they want and they get a pull on it and tug and pull back and they get to then go chase it and have a little prey drive action, you will build drive towards that bumper, and then that can become something that you can use later on. Whereas if you only ever get them out, throw it out in the water and yell at them to fetch, and you're all mad and they're like, well, that thing isn't fun. I don't want anything to do with this. And because I think you guys build the same, you build toy drive, right? You don't, it doesn't just come out with that.
Right. Yeah. Like all the breeders and stuff in Europe and some in the States that are doing puppy development, a lot of the sport clubs, they're doing a lot of rag work, whether it's leather strips or like a traditional rag, and they're doing some frustration, some teasing, and making it big prey. And
you say like traditional rag, like
just a rag, a cloth rag.
Yeah, gotcha.
Like a sturdy cloth
handkerchief.
Ooh, yeah.
Some things words get passed around sometimes, and it's one of those things that I assumed you meant a towel or a rag or something like that, but a traditional rag sounds like it could be a product I need to search on the internet for a traditional rag.
No, I think most people try to stick with the leather strips. I think it's one to keep their teeth from getting wrapped up in it as puppies and like pulling teeth and things.
Oh yeah,
I suppose with strings on.
Yeah, it's safer for them and it lasts a lot longer.
Well, plus sometimes they try to let go and they're like, I'm stuck.
Yeah,
get a tooth hooked.
But no, really, no one's teaching a dog or a puppy to release until they're older.
So you're looking at something like this? This is like
that's a
more advanced thing. This is a hard leather tug.
Hard leather tug.
Not the same thing as puppy stuff.
I mean, you could use that with a puppy. I prefer like the bite suit tugs. One of those softer jute or bite suit tugs. Something like. Yeah, we're in the right spot. What's the second one? Leather. But they just take the same materials that the bite suits are made out of. I have a puppy at the house right now, 16-week-old puppy, and he's playing with tugs. That's what we do. But I got him fired up on one of those little 8-inch bumpers, and he's bananas for that. So we'll keep encouraging that one.
This looks small too. This would be 2.5 by 13 inches.
Yeah, they make smaller ones. They'll get down to
smaller than this even.
Yeah, they'll get down to like 1.5 inches by 8 inches, which is pretty appropriate puppy size toys.
They kind of look like bumpers here. I'm gonna pull this link in here. It's all been from the same website, but
I had a friend of mine that he also just got a puppy, another poodle pointer puppy.
Okay.
And first thing I told him to do was like, get a tug. Get a tug, start working with him, doing some rag work, some frustration, getting fired up about it. We'll do some restraining and build some more frustration with him and get him retrieving and play tug with your puppy. And don't worry about the out until we're into e-collar conditioning, because we can get that done quickly and clearly with very little pressure. So.
And we really don't even train a cue. I mean, you can use a generalized, like a release type, but we don't specifically say out or give or.
And there's a reason for that. Most of the things that we've specifically built off of have been the highest level of expectation is what we're gearing toward. So, and there's a big debate in this, and with, I don't know what the word I'm like. Whatever. There's a big debate in how to release dogs to retrieve, right? So the retrieving world, they send dogs with their names, and they say that's how we can differentiate between dogs and everything else.
For a mark, though.
For a mark,
right?
Correct. Or back would be blinds. That would be the go-to word. And with our dogs, they're Bob, poking him specifically. If you haven't seen or heard Lone Duck Outfitters, he's got a really good podcast it's all based around retrieving work, building retrievers, advanced retrievers.
Love his stuff.
He's cool, dude.
Yeah.
He's a really cool dude. So, but he gives me a hard time. We did a seminar together. We've done 2 years in a row now, but he says, oh, do you do the old tap on the head too? I'm like, tap on the head. And he goes, yeah. He comes up, smacks me on the back of the head. He says, you see where that bumper went? Like, no, it's not like that. We're putting two pieces together from a light touch. Like, you feel this and you hear, it could be a name or it could be, but whatever it is quiet. And that puts us in the situation of, you need to be focusing on me handling you, because in the test, we often run into, not in a hunting situation. I know there's honoring and retriever tests. I get all of that's there, but in the test, we have a lot of, it's not that they can't do it. It's that I want to eliminate the potential for failure. Mm-hmm. So if I don't have a dog that is anticipating or potentially anticipating and makes a mistake one day because they sent off of the other handler in the test going fetch or whatever they say, or it's just a loud noise and they're focused and ready to go make a retrieve. They're excited about it. Yeah. Because they want to retrieve.
Right.
It's only an issue with dogs that want to do it because they're anticipating, oh, it might be my turn.
Yeah.
And so we eliminate that as we don't send with their name or send with a word or send with a whatever, because I don't want them at this highest level, master hunter, to anticipate that the other handler's cue was for them.
Right.
So
they're also in the highest state of drive at that point. They just saw a bird get crushed at 15 yards and they're on cloud nine.
Retriever world, I know they train, they'll say like dog or dog, whatever. And you'll see dogs that will have learned what that means. Like, oh, I'm going to go shortly. So that's something I know that in training that they will practice a lot. It'll have somebody yelling dog, like dog 34, whatever, just saying. And maybe that's not an AKC thing. That may be a NARA thing. I don't know. But I know it's something because they put those together. That's why I use a separate cue for the cockers, because if I used an okay release on a green dog, then it may be like, sweet, I get to flush the birds. And so I use a separate cue for the cockers to flush because they pick up on that stuff. And if they're in that drive and ready to go and they hear a fetch, they're like, sweet, that's me.
I think we've talked before too about not teaching an out command with you guys, and it's just make it simpler. Just hold it until I take it from you.
Right.
I don't want you to think about it. Just do that. It's not even a concern at that point.
When I put my hand on it, you give it up.
Me. Right.
That's it. And until that point, don't. Because in a high level of testing, if I bobble that retrieve, if you reach for it, dogs anticipate everything. Mm-hmm. And the sooner you figure that out, the faster listeners you'll be able to answer your own, why does my dog do this question, or because they figure out whatever your sequence is. And this is something, I say it on a regular basis, but most recently we had kind of a cool, somebody actually took me up on it 100%. And I challenged people to go 24 hours without talking to their dog.
That's
24 hours.
a lot
one day.
of leash pressure in there.
But
not verbally talking.
yes, not verbally talking to your dog. And this should just be like around the house and how you're interacting and everything else. And see how much the dog cues off of the time of day or the situation or the things that you do. Or if you walk to the door, they walk to the door with you when you need to go outside. They figure all of these things out, and they cue off of things that we don't even know we're doing most of the time.
100%.
So when you can truly evaluate them, the guy's like, wow, it was amazing. I didn't even realize these things that I was doing that my dog is recognizing. And we went an entire day and I didn't say a single word to her, So, it's one of those things that once you realize what the dog is picking up on and how good at anticipating and how situationally oriented they are, like they're going to hold on to that bird until you grab it. Or if you reach for it, you always go through the sequence of you say out, and then out becomes the out starts right before your hand does this time, or they just think it's coming and then it's like spit. And in a utility test, that you have to say fetch to pick it back up. You're docked points. I mean, you're going to lose, you're not going to fail that day unless it happens all the time, but you're definitely going to start losing points. So
it's something you see very common where people are nervous. They're almost to the bird and they say it and the dog's like, yep. And and out it comes. And it was like, and I always suggest just try taking it. Don't say anything. Just reach down, grab it. And if you need it, say it, especially in a nervous handler.
So that's where I think the tug game comes in,
right?
Because they're coming back with that object, and we've built that engagement history, that bond between us. That if you bring this back to me, there's a chance that we're going to play tug.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon for me to reach down and hold it while you're holding it. Together, we have it. You and I possess this together, and so I think that you could maybe handle some of that cueing, and reinforce a good thing is coming, because you never know, man. We might play tug with this duck, even though I don't.
Right.
But in their brain, they're like, well, he's reaching for it, and he's reached for it 1,000 times. So now
gamblers,
reach down, grab a foot, and then you give your out command, or in your all situation, just take it.
Yeah.
So.
Do try and simplify things as much as is possible. And I think that it's overlooked the amount of power that a dog's brain really has to recognize the situation and not need words for it. For example, is something as simple as place training. We use the term kennel for any place we want the dog to go. Now, the only time that that's confusing is if we were to say, put a dog bed next to a crate, next to a different style of dog bed, and say kennel, and they're all right next to each other. Which one do we go to? Well, if you point to one, they'll go to that one, right. Or kind of give a little direction. So that would be the only place it's a little confusing. But otherwise, you go to the back of the truck. Kennel, they jump in there. Kennel, they load in the box. Mm-hmm. So it's easy for our brains to want all the words because that's how we communicate, and it's overlooked that that's not necessarily it's not the native way that dogs communicate.
Yeah, I think I subscribe to the camp a little bit of, I don't remember where this number came from, but a dog can learn 120 words, right? Some number.
I've heard
it's
that.
Large,
but this is a smart dog.
Yeah, this is
we train bird dogs,
but we're gonna develop a smart dog right from the start because we're gonna do things correctly. And so I subscribe to that camp. I have place, I have kennel, and things like that, and not afraid to kind of break those things up and use different terms.
Absolutely.
But there is a method too, and there is value, and I can see it in just keeping it plain simple. So at that high level, I get it.
I think for us it comes down to the amount of people that we try and teach how to do these things. So we try and simplify what you have to remember, simplify what you have to think about. And in a way, it also complicates things because people are like, I want multiple words for this. So
And once something's generalized, it would not take much, I think, to change
words. No.
Once you have it to where they understand exactly what you're asking, it would happen you could probably change it pretty quick to go lay down. And that may even happen in your day-to-day use of a dog bed in the house. Go lay down, kennel. And pretty soon, go lay down, and they run over and go to their dog bed and not to a crate. I mean, that can happen.
That classical conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my wife's terrible about it, where she'll snap her fingers and say go, and the dogs all run to their dog bed. And I'm terrible about like, well, they got on the bed, so here's a treat.
Yeah.
So it makes life easy for her when I'm gone. So we've just built that cue in. But I think once your e-collar conditioned and you truly understand how to use negative reinforcement and still maintain a positive attitude with it, you can really build some cues, build a lot of cues. So.
They're definitely capable. Well, let's say some are definitely. We work with some. I like to call them dumb jocks. They would struggle with a few more, but for the most part, no, absolutely, they can learn way more than they're given credit for.
Yeah, and I think they struggle more with generalizing. They would just panic and end up on the table.
Oh, sure, yeah. In a sterile environment, they crush it, but then you're trying to generalize and proof.
I'm just poking him about thunder.
I like thunder though.
Thunder's cool. Thunder. We did a seminar and I was showing something and I said kennel and there was a dog bed that was the easier option and he jumped up on the table that everybody was sitting around. It's like it's a first for everything, folks. That's the first I've ever seen him jump
I am
on.
a dog trainer. Yes.
Well,
I think we've all had that happen where you're like, hey dog, do this, and they do complete opposite and everyone kind of looks at you cross-eyed. Yeah. They're animals, man. They think for themselves.
100%.
The fun ones do anyway.
Yeah, I mean, who wants a super flat? I want something with some spice and some personality, and
for sure.
Now, I'm kind of interested because this is a big part of bird dogs, and it's a big part of the training that you do from a detection work standpoint. But the using the nose and recognizing how to find things. I think that dogs' noses as a whole, I'll get my full thought out here, but the dogs' noses as a whole are way more powerful than people give them credit for. But I don't even think that we use them to the extent of what they have the ability. Because I've heard crazy claims about dogs being able to detect people in vehicles that have like the recirculator turned off, so it's exhausting air or whatever out of a vehicle. They're traveling at less than, I don't know, something close to 25 or 30 miles an hour. They could detect and track scent of people when they're truly trained to do it in situations like that. I'm wondering why you can't smell a bird at 10 or 15 yards sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. Like, where are the pieces of that, and how do we dive into scent and how dogs use their nose more?
Personally, I've heard of some moving vehicle tracking, but it's like very slow. We're talking 5 miles an hour, okay. Like four wheelers and gators, and it's usually a decently sterile environment, meaning like in the desert or backcountry.
Example's a bit aggressive.
Yeah, I'm not saying. I'm not saying that it's not possible. Sure. I just have not seen that or been exposed to that level yet. It may be out there. There are some like really stellar tracking people out there that may have figured it out. But I've asked that same question, like, how come I can take this Dutch Shepherd and teach him to find, 1/4 of a gram of an explosive charge that's buried in the back of a wall locker, that he can't get through. It's 2 doors in a container 1.5 feet from his nose, but he can find that. And 1/4 gram might be a little small still, but like it's small. It's not a lot of odor, right? Mm-hmm. But I can't get this dog to point this bird at, 10, 15 yards. And I think that we deal with quite a bit more environmental factors as far as weather's concerned and terrain is concerned. In the working dog world, we compete with distractor odors heavily, like food, dog urine, cat urine. You got to think when someone in my line of work or an officer or something is doing their job, they're in dirty environments and they run into that kind of stuff. And that's their distraction there. But I think understanding odor and how it works on the working dog side has helped me a lot in the bird dog world. Odor is sticky, it's heavy, it falls, it seeks the largest vacuum in the room, or in our case, the strongest direction of wind, and applying thermals to that, and then realizing that the sun is at all times trying to destroy our odor. And then thinking about how long birds have been sitting, and things like that. So when I am going to go hunt or I'm going to go train, I very much am putting those things that I know about odor detection in play, of working the strongest downwind side. I think most people run their bird dogs into the wind, right? Is what you always hear most people say, like hunt into the wind.
That's a pretty common thought process.
Pretty common. So I go across the longest downwind leg. So if the wind's blowing this way, I'm hunting this way and I will come back. Right. And in that, I'm picking productive areas. So for us, in terms of like a productive area, I'm looking at this corner over here and this corner over here, because this door is the largest vacuum in the room. Odor in here should be pulling out. The first place my dog should hit it would either be the door seam or one of these corners. So when I send him in here to look, I have a pattern I'm going to run.
Interesting.
But I'm going to go to that corner first, because odor's sticky, heavy, it falls, and it's seeking that vacuum. So even if it's up on top of that cabinet, you can see it fall off and trace the walls and just kind of microscopically get stuck all along in the grain of the wood along the floor and get sucked out of this vacuum. Well, when it hits that corner, it's going to pull and swirl. You're going to get like a ball of odor, right?
That's nuts.
So that's where I'm going to put him. And then he will basically track to a source, because we're teaching these dogs to get as close as you can and then tell me you found it. Where we're the opposite. We have the benefit of letting our prey go, right? So I can say, oh, I know you smelled it. Bop, there goes the bird, and we let him fly off. And that to me is awesome. I love that. I actually took a really great trainer. Both of them now are both great trainers, and took him up to a kennel and let him see some dogs, poodle pointers to be specific. And they'd never seen this. I know. I get trash for the bearded breeds.
He wants a short hair. Don't worry.
I do. I'll take legs or thunderholm. That's fine.
You said legs?
Yeah. But anyway, we take them up there, and they were impressed at like how far these dogs could hit odor from, because they're used to seeing a dog work to source, and now they've got this pointer 40 yards. I mean, the dog did a good job. She really hammered it from 40 yards, just standing there stone still, indicating. Yeah. And they were like, wow. And that was an eye-opening thing, I think, for them, just that concept. So you saw them kind of not really change anything that they were doing from a training standpoint, but both of it just gave them a broader context, and I think it opened their eyes.
So I have two pieces to that. I want to talk more about the dogs standing at further distances, because I think that's a training thing that can be an issue, or is mishandled or misunderstood or something. But dogs standing longer distance, but then also scent building. So we're talking bird dogs specifically about we put the bird out there, or we're finding birds that are wild in an area. How, from your knowledge with scent, as far as that goes, I mean, are birds building scent as they sit in an area longer? Does it work that way, or does it?
I mean, we're all shedding cells at all times, like all living creatures, right, are shedding skin cells at all times. That's why I don't prescribe to the camp of once the bird's flush, they wing washed. They're still shedding cells. It's just we've taught our dogs to hit this amount of odor, right? And it takes time for that stuff to travel. I mean, we see that. Go throw a pigeon out and run your dog 40 yards in 2 minutes. He's not going to hit it. It hasn't gotten there, right? To the level, to the amount that we have told them is acceptable to go on point, if that makes sense. And that's a very tricky game that I've thought about for a while. And that would take a very sterile environment to teach that to the amount of odor required to point would be difficult.
Well, you can see dogs work through that. You can see when they're on the edge, like if you can imagine the scent cone.
Today.
Yep. You can see dogs that are working it. And some dogs are different. You can tell that, I mean, the dogs that just stop, they smell just a little bit. I don't know how you could, it would take a dog that's very visually changes its body a lot. I think you could probably teach it with a launcher, and we kind of do, like when we recognize that a young dog is in scent, pop it. But man, to get down, because they're smelling it at some point. They're smelling something that's pulling them towards that.
Yeah.
And then they hit that threshold where they say that's enough. But man, it would take, I don't know how you would
and I think that's
get it changed there, and that what's in their mind. I mean, you can adjust it probably within a window, but
it's hard because you can't make a quail bigger than a quail, right?
Right.
But I can make this explosive that I'm trying to detect, or drugs or whatever. I can make it bigger or smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're imprinting a dog, there are camps, and I say camps, but there are methods and trainers out there and people that follow those theories that use a very, very small amount of odor to teach a dog.
Interesting. Instead of making it super easy and almost handicapping them from the beginning.
Right. Yeah. So they use a very small amount to really work that nose and build that dog. And then there are other people who use larger amounts, and there's reasons why for both. Right.
I mean, we fall into the category of using larger amounts.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
We use bird launchers, and those are stinky.
Stinky.
They're super stinky.
They're about as smelly as a covey, I think, a launcher.
Yeah.
I think a covey and a launcher are about the same.
Mm-hmm.
And you're putting a bird that's not very clean.
No.
So they're learning to point.
The homing pigeons are pretty clean,
But-
but killbirds are not clean.
No.
But to that point, though, you're also not putting it out there very long. The bird's
Right.
sitting there for 10 minutes. I mean, there are days where I'll let my bird sit there for 45 minutes. There are other days where I put it out there. I have someone else put it out there, or I'll just let them free fly out there. That's what's really helped me a lot, is I just walk up and open the box and let the quail go.
That's the best way to do it if you can.
Now you can't track me. There's none of that.
Yeah.
But I
They
think
learned
what's
that
hard
game
for
fast.
us, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think what's hard for us is like I said, you can't make a quail bigger or smaller. It's a quail. So I don't think the amount of odor is necessarily what I'm talking about. I'll use the word volume, even though I don't think that's the right word. But yeah, what you're saying is a dog caught that glimpse of odor,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to figure out at what distance is appropriate to call hot, right? To say that's it. But we didn't change the volume of odor.
And being able to detect what's hot without getting so cautious that you point every feather or every.
That's why I think there's a
hot
window
spot.
of adjustment. Like, there's probably a window, and then it would become where you don't even want a dog to detect that small of amount and stop, because then you would just be. I mean,
Constantly
imagine
just standing
a
around.
busy field in South Dakota, a food plot that was just packed full, and that's kind of where using their brain comes in, and they can start to understand, and that's probably experience. They start to understand that, like, this is overwhelming, but it's missing breath, or it's missing something, some aspect. Like, this is clearly a roost.
That's what a lot of old timers, if you will, old bird dog guys say. I hear it from I hear it from older generation field trial guys. They say that it's breath that the dogs can detect, which is why they point versus why they would go in and try and retrieve it. So, and their thought process, their scenario with this is if you tuck the head on a bird and it's sleeping, that dogs are less likely to point that. They'll just run in and grab it. And I don't necessarily buy into this, but that is the statement that is made of, they think that, and I really feel like the situations that they're talking about in this is where I was kind of going with timeline. If you are it's referred to as a callback. So anybody that's ever heard of AKC hunt tests for pointing dogs, you're in the event. If you do things well, but they don't get to see everything they need to, you'll get what's called a callback, and that's a setup scenario after the test. So cleared that up. But it's usually really quick. So they'll go put a bird out, usually sleeping, and then they'll say, bring your dog. And it'll be less than 5 minutes. 5 minutes would be a very long time.
Yeah, for
Would
that
you
bird to be
say
there.
that bird's, as in generality, is that bird hard to find?
It's very hard to find them.
Mhm.
And it's extremely hard to find.
Yep.
And so we specifically train for it.
Yeah.
Set a bird, have a dog staged, they are within 30 seconds expected to go find and point that bird.
Yeah.
And there's no time. I always described it as for scent to build, whether that is just residual shedded scent, if that's the way you would describe that, or if it's, exactly what the science process is happening.
And I think the reason so we set that up purposely to help them learn that in this scenario, we're generalizing this. When you pop out behind the truck and you smell something, you stop. When you see a dog, you stop. And we're teaching them, like, in this scenario, you need to be extra aware.
How to play the callback game.
A bunch of context. There's a lot of context.
Context, big time to that situation.
And that's where I go with the retrieving versus pointing thing, is like, there's so many more context clues for a dog versus a quail's breath. Like, sorry. I'm not
no. But that's the statement that's made. And in an example with how well that context portion works, Quest struggled just a smidgen in backing to begin with. She was a little sour to it. She was a little goofy to it when we got into the hunt test game, and she's prepping for master. She's ready to roll. And she learned that if Ethan, dad, turns away from the brace mate and then handles back, I'm looking for a back.
Right.
And anything that's not moving, then she's trying to a point. She can cast off together, she can hunt together, but if we break away and we come back to a situation, she's on her tiptoes looking, what am I supposed to back? And so
you built a whole game for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's how we can get through some of those, because a lot of the situations aren't natural. If you just have two dogs that hunt together and they have the natural ability, which I would say most dogs do, some dogs do not, but most dogs naturally will point and naturally will back. Dogs that will naturally point will typically naturally back if they're exposed properly. So if you expose them right, or if it's a natural situation, we're just hunting together. One dog goes on point, the other one will just boom, point as well. It's essentially what backing is, pointing the other dog. Mm-hmm. But when you set up these callbacks, you haven't been hunting with a dog. You've been standing next to the pickup truck.
And they're expected to sprint and just see.
Yeah, come out. Oh, wow, there's a dog. I better stop. And they'll
looking straight down at the ground.
Yes, because there's no scent built up from this bird that was set 30 seconds before that dog was expected to point it. So it's interesting.
There's more to it too. I mean, like, detection in colder environments is more difficult. The odor is condensed. We don't have a large target to hit when it's hot and these things are off gassing, whatever your target odor is. You've got a wider scent stream to work with. And I've really thought a lot about that with the pointers, right? And how that works. And I've seen it in working dogs. If it's warmer to a point, right? I mean, you can get a dog way too hot, way too fast, but within reason, a warmer climate, they'll hit it from a lot further, right? And they'll bracket in the wider bracket, but they'll get to source faster than in colder environments. I think what helps us so much, and where we as hunters and bird dog trainers come into this colder thing, is our dogs have been running for like 3 miles. We're 45 minutes out of the truck and they've got 4.5 miles on their GPS collar already. So they're gassed, they're struggling to breathe. And I think that's where the temperature really comes to help.
Yeah.
And we're also asking there's some prey drive involved in here and things like that, where there's pointing versus, trying to get straight to source. And there's some uniqueness to it, but in general, that odor in a warmer environment should expand more, right? And give you a larger area to then find said quarry or target. But it will be more difficult for them to just say right there. I've noticed with my dogs in warmer environments, and I've tried this, of keeping the hunt short, let the bird soak for certain amounts of time, but keep it short, almost like you're saying, sprint behind the truck and then boom, there's odor. And you see them hit it, you can see the change of behavior where they come out and they're like, I know it's here, but because it's expanded, it's hot, so there's thermals rising, they have that difficult moment going, I know it's here, but I can't tell you which direction other than like 180, right? Mm-hmm. I think what we get with the cold is it condenses that molecule stream. And now they can truly be like, it is right there versus this way. So,
do you see anything that directly would relate to, we've talked about heat and cold. You see anything that directly relates to humidity levels or recent rains, things like that? Because it's a common statement that's made. Oh, we just had a little rain, or we just had a rain. Should be really humid, and like humidity levels should be high enough that dogs should have really great scenting conditions. Mm-hmm. I feel like dogs almost struggle in those really damp mornings still to find stuff. I mean, do you see something similar, or is it?
Yeah. I mean, remember, odor's sticky and heavy, right? So if objects are wet, it's going to collect more odor. I think you can get too dry for sure. You can also get too wet, like you're saying. But if you're going to throw a bird out and a super heavy dew falls that night, I don't think that you're going to get a lot of odor escaping that general area. I think you'll build up a large pool right in that area until the sun comes and dries it out and blows some of that odor off.
That's interesting. That's these are really good words to describe. Bird sits there longer, it kind of soaks an area. That makes sense. Scent being sticky and damper conditions, wet grass, heavy dew, that's collecting more scent, so it keeps it more centralized.
Correct.
And that's why the same thing happens. These are all similar problems caused by different things, but a bird that's not there to soak for long enough doesn't put off as much scent in an area.
Right.
So
correct. So, but that's something to train on. That is something definitely to teach your dog to hit smaller amounts of odor. Because remember, we can't change the size of a quail.
Right.
So how are we going to teach that? We're going to lessen time that they have to build that volume of odor stream. So it is doable. But what I really like about this world versus the other is I can make the prey go away. So as soon as you hit it, I can take away your reward right then and there. And you guys see it all the time. Very quickly, you can teach a dog to point with a good wind and proper conditions, 30, 40 yards. That's not unreasonable. So.
It's not. And so that ties really well into the next piece. And this is a question that I had from a gentleman on Patreon here recently. It wasn't even a question. It was a statement that was made that ultimately led to the question. It was dog locked up on point, hit the bird at 30 or 40 yards category. We're talking the same distances here. And he moved the dog up and it took out the bird, and then he had to correct it and work through that situation. And I asked him the question, like, why did you move the dog up? He said, I know I was getting greedy, basically, and I was asking too much. I'm like, no. Why did you move the dog up? And this is where the misconception in my eyes is people view a dog that points at 30 or 40 yards as a fault. I hear this sometimes. Like, I want the dog to be closer so that I know more specifically where the bird is or the game is, right? And I view that as, like, if we want a dog to be a good wild bird dog, they have to be cautious, not overly cautious. This is all, balances, but they need to be cautious enough and respectful. I often refer to it as respect of the game. To stay distances that don't overpressure birds.
Right.
So with the poodle pointer, you said that you went out and tried. This wasn't your dog. It was at a bird dog kennel that you went out and worked with them. Yep. So do you see differences I think that there's differences in dogs' noses.
For sure.
True ability. And then I think that there's a training aspect to it. How often do you see from a detection dog situation, and we'll come back to the bird dog stuff, but how often do you see drastic differences in nose ability? Like, this dog is truly able to smell way better than other dogs.
So I don't see these dogs as puppies, right? Like, I don't see their young year developments. I'm not the one imprinting them. We're the ones kind of at that mid-level education and then higher past that. But yeah, there are definitely dogs that use their nose more intelligently than others. There are others that are more distracted by their higher drives, such as bite, right? and you just got to work through that.
I think that's a key way of saying it is they use their nose, like how they are using what they're given. Because I think I'm sure there's got to be a difference in quality, but I think there's more of a difference in ability to use the information they're getting.
The bigger thing for us is that they'll hunt, keep searching, keep looking. Because at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is find either one. If I'm going to send you into the unknown, find either one. And I think that's where you see officers and other people like using their dogs to answer that unknown question and solve that problem. So you got to be able to have your nose switched on for both. And at those higher level dogs, you do. At the younger ones, you will see dogs that struggle, that need more reinforcement. And there are tools and methods out there to fix that. And then there are some that are just out of the gate. They love to hunt and they enjoy that game, and they can transition back and forth between the two drives. Does that answer the question thoroughly?
You're talking about bite and detection, right?
Right. Yeah. So, your bite drive's always, for the most part,
clarification.
what I'm working or was working with. That's your higher drive. And I would argue that most dual purpose dogs in America that for officers and stuff are going to be higher drive on the bite.
Yeah.
It's the most satisfactory thing that you can provide them.
Yeah.
There's a reason why we use it that way.
Yeah.
But you got to teach them to turn it off. You got to teach them to switch and do this because I asked you to, and then we can go do that as a method. I
think that's it. It's probably more in the situation that the dog's noses are more closely able to work the same, but their brains and their focus levels and their desire for the specific tasks are what change.
Right.
So your noses are semi-equal in power, but your ability to focus on the task is drastically different.
Right. And I think that's a
different.
breed thing, in my opinion, to be able to switch those gears, and genetics play a decent role in
so you can watch two dogs working together, and they'll, like in our instance, in the bird dog world, working together, and one will stop and one will move in further and then stop. But you can tell they smelled at the exact same time. They're using it differently. And there can be a lot of factors to that, but you can see it consistently too, where just some dogs want a little more, or they need
a little more competitive, or a little more,
or even they just need a little more odor before they'll stop. Like their threshold is here.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think so that's a good crossover between the two.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Callie, one of our first dogs that I worked with, one of our foundation female, she was what I would refer to as the shortest nosed dog that I ever hunted behind, but was really good at utilizing what she had, or she was just really good at sneaking up on stuff, because you killed a lot of birds over her.
Right.
And she would pin them down, but when she stopped and pointed, you knew there was a bird right there. But you also didn't see her run around pushing birds out everywhere.
Right.
She just used it differently and wanted to, I don't want to say put her nose on them, because she wasn't like that, but it was definitely, she's always closer to birds than the average other dog. And, when we started working with, and kind of the way that we develop dogs and teaching respect from an early age, I see a lot of young dogs that will hit that 30, 40, sometimes even 50 in the right conditions. And it's like, there's no way. And then you kind of gauge the wind and kind of look, and you're like, yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. And I'm going to reward this at this point. And then you have to balance it out with, are you being too cautious, pointing scent that's not still there?
Right. That's what the worry is that those puppies, now you pull off that crazy huge launcher scent, and then they start just catching whiffs of stuff and then stopping. And so that can be the concern then, is now all of a sudden you're pointing feathers or roosts, or
I think over time they learn not to do that.
Yeah.
And personally, if my dog points a roost, like I hunt wild birds, I want to put that in my GPS anyway. So thank you for telling me where it was.
Sweet.
Yeah.
It's a good spot.
I've had him find some roosts for me, and all right, buddy, hey, it just turned daylight, so they're not far.
Right.
And that's my own ism. But I want a dog that I want a nose, right? I want to train that nose to work as much as it can. So I'm always striving to get him or them to hit odor from as far as possible. Where our dogs struggle, and I'm speaking for the working dog world, I guess, but without speaking for them at the same time.
Yeah.
We struggle with, we can't get close enough, right? Because we've paid them at source. We have that repetition built of you've got to get this close to get paid. And now when I put that odor in the bathroom and shut the door and you're 7-8 feet from it with a barrier and probably a decent amount of odor too. So you'll see them just pacing back and forth or in a vehicle with all the doors shut sometimes, or just a deeper object up on a ceiling. And they can't get to it, can't put their nose on it, and they will struggle to final. So I think we kind of go opposites. Some of the hunting dogs are getting too close and having issues there, and we're far away and having issues there.
Yeah.
Is a common one that I see.
So, and final meaning whatever they're supposed to do is
alert,
sit,
indicate,
bark,
whatever.
or
indicate. So, that'd be a sit for. I'll just 90% of folks.
It's an interesting thing. And then I want to jump from the nose category and how that applies to birds and talk about wild bird hunting, because we're about to get there. But the cool thing, we've worked with a couple different people that do primarily detection work, that they bought a couple dogs from us, and they have a whole testing thing trying to establish prevent buying dogs that are going to have issues with what you were talking about with, I don't want to say instabilities, but
environmental deficiencies.
Struggle with. And so they do a number of different tests and whatever else. And it's really simple things that you would never even think about. One of which was just like open an umbrella slowly, not try and startle the dog, but here is a new thing. Yeah. What is your response to that? And
here's a guy in a kayak.
Guy in a kayak. Yeah. I mean, one day I will discuss that dog in particular with someone, and I'm excited for that conversation. But yes, that is another environmental
I got in
factor.
the kayak and he was like, no, sir.
Yeah. Another good one is, sit in a dark hallway and call the dog to you. See if he'll come to you for food or a ball. Will he cross that threshold to come get his toy? I've seen
in the dark.
There's some other ones out
Interesting.
there.
Interesting.
Every trainer's kind of got their own flavor of, there's no like set standard. So everyone's kind of got their own, I'm going to make my $1 million with testing puppies this way.
Right.
Thing, so.
Yeah. So the cool thing about it though, was just in regards to, final as what the term you use. So they referred to it as a passive response when I talked to them as well.
Passive alert.
So they were super excited. This was nearly 10 years ago now, but it was primarily, pointy-eared dogs, or they'd started using some retrievers for detection work, and they were like, man, when this dog finds scent, it just locks up and points.
Yeah.
This is so much easier than trying to teach this with a retriever. So that was kind of a cool.
Who wants to grab the bomb?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I mean, back in the day, they taught the aggressive alert, right? So the dog would find odor and then literally just go to town, trying to tear it and dig it out. And you can imagine how that doesn't turn out well for explosive handlers who are in watching an explosive handler handle versus a pick your other detection. There's a lot of really cool ones out there. Like someone was using truffles.
Yeah.
Right?
I was just going to say
cool.
Truffles.
That's really cool. Bed bugs. Bed bugs are huge.
Oh yeah.
That's drugs, right? But those people will handle differently than explosive detection handler, because there's some real skin in the game on this side. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Not that these folks don't do good work, and I watch them all the time, and it's impressive. Like the truffle thing blew my mind. I didn't know that they were doing that with dogs, so I kind of went down that rabbit hole too.
So, with regards to noses being better than other noses, there's a lot of conversation around different species of wild birds, and your dog is for example, this would be the king of upland game, right? Everybody knows what I'm talking about. The ruffed grouse.
Oh.
But they'll say these are real grouse dogs. This specific, or they're bred as real grouse dogs. And so my question or thought process behind this is it, again, nose related, or is it personality related that allows them to be better naturally? Not talking about excessive amounts of exposure to learn something. Some dogs are naturally better at specific things. Is that my nose works better, or is it a personality and ability to, a combination of drive or lack thereof drive? However that swings in the category of, is it desire to point or is it lack of desire to catch? But is it more of a personality thing or a dog's actual nose that makes them better at specific wild birds than other dogs?
And you're really making me take a stance on that one. No, like just from my background, like I subscribe to Odor is Odor, and that's it. But, and each one's different, and some are more powerful than others. I don't necessarily think that a grouse stinks any less than a quail.
No,
I don't. But they're not.
They live in
a covey bird, right? They're usually by themselves, and they're usually on the move.
Yeah, a little wilier, and in a wetter environment on average.
Mm-hmm.
So with the sticky scent, I mean, you're talking about
not as windy.
Not as windy typically.
It's a more difficult environment to work in, but I still say Odor is Odor. I've heard about the real grouse dogs. I think that it's just an odor game. That's simple as that. You got to put your dog in protective areas and work the wind correctly. And if those birds are wily and they want to jump, they're gonna jump regardless.
And I think too, the dogs, the birds are going to act differently. Like a rough grouse, while it doesn't act like a woodcock, they're in the same place.
Correct.
And so you can have dogs that can just nail woodcock, nail, and can't handle rough grouse. And that could be nothing to do with, it could just be how they're pressuring the bird or how the bird reacts to pressure. They get so used to being able to apply a certain amount of pressure or to handle that bird a certain way. And then all of a sudden now this one, they can't. I feel like personally that dogs that hunt a lot of pheasants can transition to rough grouse pretty well.
Yeah.
Is what I feel like.
Run track game.
Yeah.
It comes back to thresholds, right? It's a threshold for the dog with odor to indicate or point. It's a threshold for the bird species to handle dog pressure. Mm-hmm. So you combine those two and then change the environments from Kansas prairie to Michigan
Aspens.
Northwoods.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, we're talking about different games, but at the end of the day, I still go back to Odor is Odor.
Yeah.
There's a great saying out there from the place where I first learned all my dog stuff, of stimulus equals response equals reward. So stimulus of bird odor equals your response to point equals the bird will flush, and hopefully we make the shot and you get a retrieve.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Right? So
we hear, I do a little bit of guiding, and here on a regular basis, it's a pretty common argument among groups when we pheasant hunt. We take more traditional Dakota hunt process. So there's more people. We do only 10-man groups, but there are some bigger groups that go hunting still. Everything else we do, it's smaller groups. I mean, like 5 would be a big group, and anything else that we go and do.
Yeah, and the ranch is no more than 4.
Yeah. And I think quail are some of the most dangerous birds to hunt, specifically pen-raised quail on top of that, if you're ever getting the opportunity to do that, just because they have erratic flight patterns and it's low and whatever else. But it's a pretty common argument in the Dakotas of walking too fast or walking too slow, and how many birds did we walk over versus how many birds did we overpressure, and what is the answer to that. And I think it goes, personally, I always just explain it. They're wild birds, so they're going to handle pressure differently. And we've selectively bred all of them for a very long time not to fly. So
we're shooting
all the flyers
right.
are getting shot outside of the hens. I mean, so there's still a 50-50 chance there.
They're passing on some genetics,
some flying genetics. But it's one of those that, the dogs learn how to do that. And we just have to pick a reasonable pace to kind of pursue, and then trust dogs and watch dogs. And I get poked a lot when I do go on hunt as being the bird magnet.
Right.
Like, no matter where you go, no matter where I go, the dogs typically go.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, I do a really good job paying attention to the dogs themselves. So I'm more aware of when birds get up to have an opportunity to shoot at them. But it's the dogs are the most powerful tool that we have in the field. and their nose attached to the front of their face is the key to that tool.
Well, and you have the experience, both of you with these dogs to say, hey, that's a productive area. I'm going to kind of steer my body this way. Oh, look, the dog's sort of swinging in front, and I see a tail just a little more. And you can see those things coming and lead success that way.
I feel like you're not paying attention to those things. It's one of those that it'd almost be like wearing blinders, basically, and saying, all right, shoot. You get up like, I don't even know where I'm looking.
Yeah, I'm not ready at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I brought a working dog in here, right, and put a hideout and just cut him off, if he's not throwing big changes, you may not see it. I might see it because I have that experience. But, someone who's not savvy in that world and seen that a lot may not see those small context clues that he's trying to figure it out. And that's where you guys are. You've got so much experience with this that you see the small context clues of like, in that thicket, I have a feeling. And, you have that spidey sense of reading that dog, and that's why.
Yeah. And you see it we'll see it with dogs. Like Breezy's my favorite example of this, that I'll follow the Garmin. I tend to let the dog, I always want the dog and the bird to figure it out because they know how to handle each other. The birds don't really know how to handle us as much. They're not used to working with us. They see the dog type predator a lot, and they see, and the dogs see birds a lot. But Breezy makes it easy. You walk up to her and she's looking back at you. Let's go. It ran. But there's other dogs that are standing there just as, they'll stand there just as steady, and you just have to learn your individual dog and say, nope, like this one I can tell has moved on. And those things like start building success, even more success, to know, all right, I need to be ready now. Not only is my dog telling me that the bird isn't here, but it's running. Like there is a bird, it's just not right here. And picking up on all those little minute details is what grows success in the field for sure when you're watching the dogs.
Yeah, I think that takes a lot of experience on you and the dog to do a run, tracking point, to not lose confidence in your dog, and for your dog to maintain confidence in Odor. I think that takes a lot of experience on both sides.
Yeah.
I like it.
All righty.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for having me out and training all week. It's been a blast.
Yeah, Creek's duck search looked sweet today.
Yeah,
he killed it.
Improved.
Killed it.
Tenfold. So all those lining drills and everything, we kind of we're meeting a happy middle ground. So
between look to me to handle and go have fun.
Yeah. Yep. We're getting there.
I like it.
Awesome.